So, the unicorn. No, not that unicorn. This unicorn. Well, more like this unicorn, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, a bit of plot summary. Quite a lot happens in a very short amount of time, so this might get a little intense. The Unicorn is Iris Murdoch's seventh novel. This is a Gothic novel, however, at times it seems more like a parody of a Gothic novel. The story takes place in the remote region of West Ireland, where there are two manors, Gaze and Riders. Gaze is a place of mystery. It almost seems to not belong in the present time, more about the importance of time later. The plot relies heavily on surprise, suspense, and fragmented revelations of past actions and their present consequences. Revealed in bits, the antecedent action of the novel is essential to its plot. 9 years before the novel's opening, Hannah Creamsmith, mistress of Gay's Castle and wife of her first cousin Peter, not the greatest husband in the world, mind you, began an affair with her neighbor, Philip Pip Leor. 2 years later, they were discovered by Peter with the aid of Gerald Scotta, one of Peter's many lovers, and after an ensuing argument, during which Hannah may or may not have tried to kill Peter by pushing him over a cliff and thereby maiming him, he imprisoned her in the house and went to New York. Left as jailer was Gerald Scotta, which seems kind of mean of Peter, doesn't it, seeing as he left his lover behind to have affairs with men and women alike, while he stuck watching his wife. After 2 more years, Hannah tried to escape, but was sent back by her father. Consequently, Peter increased her guard by employing two distant cousins, Jamesy and Violet Evercreech. Jamesy, after 2 years, took pity on Hannah and attempted to rescue her, but was caught by Gerald, who, after whipping the boy, became his lover in a sadomasochistic relationship. Creepily enough, Jamesy keeps pictures. The novel begins with Marian Taylor's arrival at Gay's Castle. Thinking she's been hired to tutor a child, she's surprised to learn that she is to be a companion to Hannah, who by now has been imprisoned for 7 years. Not that anyone at Gay's was eager to tell her that. Enchanted as all are by the fey and mysterious Hannah, more about this later as well, Marian slowly begins to learn the sad history of Gay's and its inhabitants, and she falls more and more deeply under the spell of the place. An interesting bit of foreshadowing occurs when Marian is warned not to venture at night. Apparently a man was slowly sucked into the bog, while the townspeople could hear him but not find him. Another outsider, Effingham Cooper, arrives at Riders, and together the two form the narrative consciousness of the novel. Effingham, in love, you can't see it, but I'm using air quotes, with Hannah for 4 years and a frequent house guest at Riders, quickly forms an alliance with Marian in pity for Hannah's plight. Together they plan to kidnap her and take her away from Gaze, although it is interesting to note that he is quite hesitant to do so, which foreshadows that he loves Hannah selfishly and is only interested in the image she projects onto her. But again, more about this later. The plan fails because of Effingham's huge ego in giving a letter to Pip's sister Alice, and Peter's imminent return is announced. Effingham wanders off alone, and this is where the foreshadowing comes into play. He's stuck in the bog. However, Faye like Dennis Nolan is able to save him in the nick of time. After this experience, he has a rather interesting revelation about love, professing to love Alice, Hannah, Marian, and everyone really. Can't blame a man for trying. By this point, the facts of the story have all been revealed, if not all the motives and complexities. During the wait for Peter, many emotional and sexual tensions surface, and after apparently having dominated Hannah sexually, Gerald is shot and killed by her, using the gun left by Pip on his only visit to her in the 7 years of her confinement. It is revealed that Peter never intended to return home, and this was likely a power play on the part of Gerald. Shortly afterward, Marian and Jamesy release Hannah from her locked rooms, and she goes out and drowns herself. On his arrival, Peter is drowned by Dennis Nolan, Hannah's bookkeeper, in a staged accident, and Pip commits suicide. And so, with the deaths of the four who began the story, the spell around Gaze ends. Before their dispersal, the remaining characters learn that Hannah has left her estate to Max Lior, the scholarly father of Pip and Anna, whom she had never met, but whom she really loved. Now, the characters. It is interesting to note that all of the characters project a different image onto Hannah. Marian Taylor. An ex-school mistress, Marian becomes Hannah's new tutor/companion after being turned away by Joffrey, a man she was in love with. She sees Hannah as an innocent woman deserving to be rescued, and, believing herself to be the only one not under Gaze's spell, attempts to do so. Hannah Creamsmith. Hannah's the mistress at Gay's Castle and the wife of Peter Creamsmith, though he's never home. She's been kept in the house for 7 years now after her husband caught her with Pip Leor, and she may or may not have pushed him off a cliff. Interestingly enough, though Hannah is the unicorn of the title, she describes herself as a vampire, feeding off the interest and emotion that others have invested in her entrapment rather than feeling herself. Though it is interesting to note that the other characters also feed off of her. Indeed, though others claim that she accepts her punishment because she is religious, she claims that she does so in order that she might be seen as a god. However, like a unicorn, Hannah is a mysterious creature who enchants all around her, but who is inaccessible to everyone. Also like a unicorn, her character depends on who is giving the description. She's all at once whore and goddess, murderous and saint. She's either a wretched prisoner or a willing recluse. Unknowable and unreachable, she enchants all around her, and in the love that each character feels for her, she is encompassed in the full range of human affection. Since her reality is impossible to know, she becomes a reflection of each character's fantasy about her. Like the unicorn, she's a test of the purity and innocence of others in her own guilt and suffering. Peter Creamsmith. Hannah's absentee husband. He has been known to have extramarital affairs with women and men alike. He is never at Gaze except when his body is brought back. He and Gerald were in a sort of dominant, submissive relationship. Gerald Scotthow, Hannah's jailer. He's all sorts of tall, dark, and handsome. He's a local, said to have fairy powers, and he's indeed a powerful and almost demonic male enchanter who imposes his will on the other characters, a type of man Murdoch is said to have modeled on her lover, the noble laureate Elias Canetti. In fact, Marian finds herself drawn to Gerald even though she fears him. He is quite the man's man, as it were. Jamesy Evercreech, brother of Violet Evercreech. When he first came to Gaze, he tried to rescue Hannah, but was unfortunately caught by Gerald. The two are now in a sort of sadomasochistic relationship. However, his sister Violet reveals that he is in love with Marian as well. Jamesy is the one that convinces Marian to let Hannah go. Violet Evercreech, sister of Jamesy. She's very intense and strict. It's implied that she is also into Marion. Interestingly enough, though she claims to love Hannah, she often refers to her as a whore and a murderess who needs to face her punishment. And after finding out that Hannah did not write a will in her favor, her last words before she leaves Gaze are, "What a bitch. What a perfect bitch." Dennis Nolan. Dennis is, like Gerald, a native man with fairy powers. He is both simple and mysterious. Dennis brings Hannah animals that he finds to please her and cares for the fish in the pond. He saves Effingham from the bog after the failed rescue attempt. It is to Dennis that Marion turns when she is in need of comfort. He admits to Marion that it was he who killed Peter Creamsmith while driving him to Gaze. Interestingly enough, Dennis seems to be the only one who truly and selflessly loves Hannah. Philip Pip Leyor. Hannah's lover 9 years ago. He has kept watch over her from Ryder since her imprisonment, only visiting once to take her away, but she refuses and uses his gun to kill Gerald. His vigil over, he is said to have accidentally shot and killed himself while cleaning his gun, which is the same story that was used to cover up Gerald's death. Alice Leyor. Pip's sister. She has loved Effingham for years and watches over Hannah, his new love, with an almost masochistic intensity. She's jealous of pretty much every girl he looks at. She attempted to take advantage of Dennis by the pond, but has put no stop to the rumor that he tried to rape her. Max Leyor, father of Pip and Alice and Effingham's old tutor. He has never been to see Hannah, but seems to understand her situation much better than anyone else. He only speaks twice, but each time we are given valuable insight into Hannah's true character. Max is a sort of foil to Hannah, as he is a recluse by choice. Effingham Cooper, Hannah's new love interest. Have I mentioned that his ego is huge? He's also rather selfish. He wants to keep Hannah all to himself, even at the cost of her sanity. Though he claims to love Hannah, he always seems to leave when she needs him most. Effingham flits about, proclaiming his love to 3 different women in one book. He does not feel that he is in any way responsible for Hannah's death, and seems to feel nothing but relief. Effingham realizes that he was never really in love with Hannah. He loved that she was what his mother was not, faithful, for, though Hannah's technically having an affair with Effingham, she will not sleep with him. Now that I have literally a minute left, let's get to the good stuff. Time, or rather the absence of time passing, plays a very important role in this book. Hannah is completely in the present, and though she has been in prison for 7 years, she does not seem to have aged a day until the spell over Gaze starts to unravel. Note that this also applies to Pip, who Effingham describes as both a youth and a man. And in the 4 years that Effingham has loved Hannah, their relationship has not changed. Even Gaze Castle does not seem to belong in the present time. Suffering. Max Leor talks about the Greek concept of that. He says that people continue to pass on suffering until it gets to a truly good person who refuses to pass it on. This follows the thinking of French philosopher Simon Weil, who argued that suffering leads to excessive self-involvement and violence. In Hannah, Murdoch shows the reader that suffering can also disguise itself as purification, but the end is the same. Hannah admits that she herself does not feel suffering, but passes it on to everyone who hears her story. And finally, the unicorn shares with Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness an insistence on the ultimate unknowability of another human being and the futility of its search for absolute values in a contingent world. But Murdoch carries this level of exploration even farther than did Conrad. First, she demonstrates the importance and redemptive value of human relationships and how an individual's personal choices, or lack of them, can affect others. More specifically, the novel is a parable of the dangers of failing to participate in a shared objective reality, of relying on the imagination too much by constructing personal myths. Fantasy in this work is a distorting, destructive force which leads to tragedy.